Hello, and welcome to Meet the Author. It's not just an interview, it's a conversation, and you're part of it. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Meet the Author is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation. We're a nonprofit, all volunteer organization. Our vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. Our mission is to support transformations in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another, so as to bring about positive change in the world, individually and collectively. Please visit us at ifgt.net. If you would like to join our community of change makers, there's a join button on the main menu. And if you'd like to support our work, including programs like this one, there's a donate button, and that takes you right through to PayPal. This program is being recorded, and when it's done being edited, it'll be published on IFGT's YouTube channel. So we also invite you to subscribe to our channel, and please also press that little bell icon next to the subscribe button so you're notified whenever we do publish new material such as this program. We have, as I said in the introduction for the title of the program, one of the things Meet the Author likes to do to distinguish this program is to invite our live audience to participate with our guests, and they're welcome to do so either simply by typing questions in the chat and I'll read them, or if they'd like to come on live and speak directly with our guests, please just type the letter Q in the chat, and that'll be my signal to know that you want to come on live with our guests. So with that brief introduction of the program, it's my distinct pleasure, and I'm very excited to introduce our guests for today. Mark Victor Hansen and Crystal Dwyer Hansen will be discussing their latest book, which is called Ask, The Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. And before I read brief bios of Mark and Crystal, I just wanted to give a little shout out to last month's guest, who is William Childs, otherwise known as Pila of Hawaii. And you can now see the interview that we did with Pila last month on our YouTube channel. But it's because of Pila's interest in our work that he introduced us to Mark and Crystal. And so without Pila, this would not have happened. And so we're, again, very, very grateful to him for all he's done for us. He's also licensed his soundtracks of very moving Hawaiian chants and guided meditations. Those are now available also on our website. We simply request a donation. So with that, let me read some brief biographies just to make sure, probably not necessary with tonight's guests, but let me do that, and then we'll start the conversation. So for Mark, along with business partner Jack Canfield, Mark Hansen is best known for creating Chicken Soup for the Soul books are one of the most successful publishing franchises in the world today, with more than 500 million books sold internationally and more than 100 licensed products. The name Chicken Soup was chosen because of the use of chicken soup as a home remedy for the sick. The first Chicken Soup book, published by Health Communications Inc., sold more than 2 million copies. There are now over 500 million copies in print and in 54 languages worldwide. It's just phenomenal. And for those who may not know, that has also earned Mark a spot in Guinness Book of World Records. In 2004, Mark Hansen was inducted into the Sales and Marketing Executive International's Hall of Fame, receiving the Ambassador of Free Enterprise Award. He is also the recipient of the 2004 Visionary Philanthropist for Youth Award by Covenant House of California. In 2002, the University of Toledo presented Hansen with an honorary PhD in Business Administration and established the Mark Victor Hansen Entrepreneurial Excellence Fund that will help shape the minds of future business leaders and assist in the development of the faculty who will teach them. That's outstanding. In 2000, the Horatio Alger Association of Distinguished Americans honored Mark with the prestigious Horatio Alger Award as an American leader who personifies the virtues and principles inherent in the success stories written by 19th century American author Horatio Alger Jr. And lastly, although this is the short version of Mark's biography, but in 2000, Northwood University honored him as the Outstanding Business Leader of the Year. So, and Crystal Dwyer Hansen is an international speaker, researcher, corporate consultant, author, and entrepreneur. Her expertise is in the field of human potential. Through her years spent as a transformational life coach and wellness nutrition expert, she has seen people experience profound and lasting transformation in relationships, career, health, and wellness by tapping into their own inner resources. Having personally guided people from seemingly impossible states of depression, anxiety, and hopelessness to triumph, freedom, and happiness is what drives Crystal's conviction that all people have unlimited potential for greatness if they only understand how to access those resources. Crystal's research in the fields of neuroscience, epigenetics, and quantum physics provides the scientific knowledge she uses to help people use their minds proactively and evolve their consciousness to move themselves out of misery and into a fulfilled and happy life. Crystal's personal coaching, speaking, CD and video programs, books, and articles have helped people all over the world. She's a member of the International Coaching Federation, a certified clinical hypnotherapist, the founder of Crystal Vision Life Limited, and Skinny Life, a wellness company. And there are URLs for both of those on YouTube. Her book, Skinny Life, The Secret to Being Physically, Emotionally, and Spiritually Fit, is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. She travels the world with Mark, speaking, inspiring, and teaching leadership. Crystal and Mark are both passionate about the health of our planet, awesome, and the need to create comprehensively sustainable energy and water solutions. Together, they are owners of Natural Power Concepts, a Hawaii-based company focused on cleaning up the planet through natural energy devices. They live happily in beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona. So the fact that you found an hour for us is remarkable, and we are so grateful that you've done so. So welcome to Meet the Author.
We're honored. Thank you for having us. Look forward to chatting with all of you.
So why don't I start off even though the book's been out a couple of years, and you were saying before the show how many of these interviews you've done, as well as how widely distributed it is, but I'm going to guess that there might be still one or two people on the planet that haven't read it. And it's so compelling and inspiring. I want to make sure that we kind of describe it a little bit, but I'm going to start by saying I did watch several of those other interviews. And in one, Mark, I believe you were talking about some of the other things that you're doing that are going to continue this work. And so I kind of wanted to make sure that we touch on that. But let me start off by asking, you've done so many books, you've done so many other things. Why did you write Ask Now?
We've been blessed to travel to 80 countries around the world, talk to some 7 million people, and we meet everybody, high, low, everybody. But the difference between somebody who succeeds a little and somebody who's vastly successful is one thing and one only. They learn to ASK to GET what they want. And spiritually, ask and you shall receive. But what happened is the big guy never outlined how to do that. So what we decided to do is say, hey, look, we're going to ask in three: ask yourself, ask others, ask God. 3 definitive channels. And once you master that, you've mastered your life. You've mastered your whole future existence. And what we do is we detail it, and the amount of emails we get every day suggests that it's working. So we're blissfully thankful. So
what do you hope to accomplish with this? What's the overall impact or importance that for this book? Because I believe I heard you say that in another interview that you think this is going to be your biggest work since Chicken Soup for the Soul.
I think it'll transcend Chicken Soup. Like, Chicken Soup is wonderful. And like you said, chicken soup is what your mother or grandmother gave you when you're sick to get well. And Dr. Canfield and I thought the soul of America was sick. What we didn't realize, the soul of the world's sick. And my impression of what's happened, the war and COVID and all the inflation and hyperinflation, it's sicker now than ever. So people have to learn to ASK to GET. One of the stories we have in there from our dear friend Rita Davenport says, it's the first time in history everyone's going to get their ask in gear.
Right.
That's a cute line.
Right. So this is a way of helping people deal with the state of the world now. And is that kind of it? Okay. Yeah. So I want to get back to the question I started asking, which is, And Crystal, I think I heard you mentioning this on an interview, that there's a website, I believe, and or discussion forums that have been created so that it's not just about reading the book and then helping people do things.
Exactly, Ken. So we just, it's been so rewarding just to hear people's feedback, and you know, like, people have lost hope. A lot of people have lost hope. There have been a lot of changes. While some people are doing okay, people have gotten very depressed, hopeless, and really don't know where to go. The world's changed a lot. And so, you know, we say with asking, you know, don't we most of us look around our lives and try to take feedback from the lives we're already living, to try to move forward, and that never works, because we keep getting more of what we're already getting. And so what happens when you start asking and learn to master your asking, you start to open this world of possibilities. And so we created a free webinar for everyone to come to. If you go to definitely get the book, because it's important to, and I think you know this now, read the book and go back to it, highlight your favorite parts, pay attention to what really is meaningful to you, and then revisit that, because there's something in there that you need to dig deeper with. The book goes into a lot of layers, as you know. But if you go to askthebookclub.com, we'll send you a free invitation to the free webinar, because we don't want people to just read it and then forget. We want to keep going with the asking journey and make sure that everybody continues to get stronger in their asking, to get rid of those roadblocks that we talk about in the book, and to really move forward as the best version of themselves possible.
We want people to become master askers. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ken.
Not at all, please.
Become masters at asking, because why not have a fulfilled life where you really realize 100% of your potential? Because coming from a blue collar family where my parents, we talked about before the show, were illiterate Danish people, there's no chance that I'd become world's best-selling author. But I'm trying to fulfill that. And then we've got lots of other assignments that we've given ourselves. And the subtitle of the book is The Bridge from Your Dream to Your Destiny. We think everyone was coded at birth with a destiny. And our job is to give you a product that you ask the questions to yourself or others, or buddy up with somebody. 1 and 1 equals power 11. You ask every question in the book to somebody else and write out the answers for them or with them, whether it's your partner, your spouse, your business partner, church mate, temple, ashram, mosque, intellectual partner, whatever it is, spiritual partner, and go through it. And what happens is your life will unfold and you'll fulfill your destiny. Because let me just do the negative of it. We just watched the video with 20,000 people that were interviewed about NEDs, near-death experience. They all went to the other side. Everyone came back. Whatever their spiritual being is that they saw said, whoops, sorry, you're not done yet. Go back, finish your assignment. And they said, no, I really like it here, because, you know, we're in a limited electromagnetic spectrum, and on the other side, it's infinite.
Yeah. I don't think there's really a good way to, in an interview, impress well enough how much of an impact this book has. It really, I kind of try to get through these books, and I'm half thinking about preparing for these interviews. It made me stop and think several times, and it made me think a lot about my own life and where I'm at this point, but also a lot about IFGT and what we can do as an organization. And it sounds so benign in a way to just make the principle of all this just about asking questions. And then when you really get into it, you realize how critical that is. And you talk about these 7 roadblocks to asking questions, which you mentioned a little earlier. And that is a nice introduction that kind of points out why something that sounds so simple isn't actually done. And I wonder if you just to whet the appetites of our audience, just maybe share 1 or 2 of those to give some flavor of what those can be like.
Right. So we have the 7 roadblocks, and the first one is unworthiness. And that's just such a universal experience for everybody. We don't ask for what we want and deserve in life, because at some level, we feel a little unworthy. We don't feel we're enough, or we don't feel we're good enough. And sometimes that feeling exists at a very kind of subconscious level. We kind of make excuses why we're not doing what we want to do, or why we're not getting what we want. But it's that unworthiness. And it really comes from that childhood programming, you know, that's just telling us that message again and again. So it's so important to identify these roadblocks. What are they for me? And, you know, once we start to recognize them, that's when the door opens and we can start to eliminate them. The second one is naivete, and I think that's a really important one. I tell the story in there about, you know, when my children were very young, 16 months apart, we hired this beautiful Filipina gal, and she would make these wonderful dishes for our family. She loved cooking. And one day she showed up and cut up some fruit and said, "Try this, Crystal." It was a juicy kind of orange looking fruit. And I tasted it and I'm like, "What is this?" And she goes, "It's a mango." And I go, "How come I've never tried a mango?"
Yeah.
And I thought I was so worldly. I traveled all over the world, Europe, you know, been to Mexico a lot of times, but somehow I missed the mangoes. But, you know, I'm a girl from Idaho. I grew up with a lot of potatoes, no mangoes. And I said, "Where'd you get these, Melda?" And she said, I thought she'd say, I brought them back from the Philippines. And she said, "At the grocery store." And so it made me think, how am I walking by like the most wonderful fruit in the world every time I go to the grocery store? And what else am I missing? Just because I'm like, you know, we don't know what we don't know. We don't even know to ask for it. And I think we do that in life generally. It's our own naivete. We might be walking past that person who's so talented, who might be our next best advocate or our new friend or a business partner, or an opportunity that could be really, truly incredible, or an experience where we could support something. And we just pass it by because we don't know it's there for us. We don't think to look or to ask. And so I think that's one of the things we really try to do with this asking journey, teach ourselves and others. It's like suspend that naivete and start to live in a state of wonder, because that state of wonder is a form of asking, what is this? You know, what is this be? What could this be? What could be revealed to me if I look deeper, you know, and opening up that beautiful curiosity that we had as children, because it is such a precursor to growth and to evolution.
Yeah. And it's, I think a lot of us have the experience, at least in the US culture, of having some experiences with being told directly or indirectly to not ask questions, or, you know, those feelings of discomfort that come along. And I think if a child has a reasonably nurturing environment, we're born naturally curious and do ask questions. It's the kind of cliche of the kid that's asking why, but over time we kind of get that squelched out of us. And this book points that out and then shows just what we've lost in that, as well as how powerful it is to then kind of reawaken that. So that's part of the magic of this book, I think, or the power, at least, of it. The book starts out with, well, let me say this. Part of the reason this book is so interesting and good to read, and I think it's part of your style of many of the books that you've written, is because it's a nice mix of getting concepts and ideas across, but then illustrated in a very easy to read and entertaining style with real life stories by a variety of people. And so it kind of takes the conceptual and in some cases pretty deep theoretical things that we'll probably address in a few minutes, but puts them into everyday terms and real life examples. And so that's another reason why I highly recommend the book, because it's not one of those heavy textbooks that you know, to learn this, you know, you have to study for the test. It kind of, the points are made, and if you're struggling with them at all, it's nice to then get those. But you start that whole adventure with the fable of Michaela. And Mark shared with me in an email something, and I hope I'm not letting cats out of the bag, but it sounds like, Crystal, you've expanded that story and there may be more to it than a written form. Is that for public digest yet?
Yeah, we can drop some hints about that, but it's been really fun. I think both Mark and I have been really surprised at the reaction to the fable of Michaela, because as you know, Ken, you know, Michaela starts out, she's lost everything. She's lost her mother, then her father. The bill collectors took her home away from her. This takes place in the time of kings and queens. And so she's sleeping in a grove of trees, and she her job every day is basically as an indentured servant at a stone quarry. And so her every day is about just moving heavy stones, heavy rocks from one place to another. And I think that's how a lot of people feel in their lives. You know, that life feels like I'm just moving heavy stones from one place to another every day. You know, so in some ways it's every woman, every man's story. But I'm not going to give it away. But you know, she falls asleep into an exhausted sleep one night in her grove, and this being comes to her and takes her on this journey and reveals to her that the secret, I won't say everything he says, but basically the secret is learning to ask and to never stop asking. And from that moment forward, she becomes aware of, you know, just the question, who is that person? You know, why are they here? What do they do? And so as she starts to inquire, she starts to, first of all, ask herself, ask others, and then ask God, the divine. Her life by the end of the fable, as you know, turns around 180 degrees. And it's so crazy because Mark and I were just going to write a fable and we'll pass it back and forth like we did the rest of the book. You know, both of us write on it. But I started writing that fable, Ken, and it is like, I just channeled it. It was crazy. Yeah, I was so grateful for it. I went back and read. Mark cried when he read it. He's like, well, honey, we were going to split the fable up. And he said, no, put it in the front of the book. And then other people have had such a strong response to it. And we had a Hollywood producer say, this needs to be a movie. And so now I'm expanding the fable. So it's really going to be fun. I've added some characters and kind of folded the roadblocks into the fable itself, because right now they're out of the fable. And it is, I'm so excited for this. So stay tuned.
May I
Yeah, sounds like we may be seeing some Michaelas at Halloween, maybe. I don't know.
So, wouldn't that be fun?
I think that's going to actually happen. What happens is I wrote the foreword to a book called The Ultimate Gift by Jim Stovall, a blind guy who created narrative TV and has got 14 people paying like Netflix prices for that. And he helps all the blind to see, which is really interesting because he went blind at age 19 and created that with another woman. Anyhow,
And this is one of those fascinating stories in the book.
Yeah,
So,
no, he's a football player. He spent his life wanting to be a football player. Now he listens to a book a day at 5 times the speed, which he created. So a whole nother little thing that's not in the book, but he is perfect wisdom. I call him on the phone and I've never met him until about a year ago. We went to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now we've been there twice. We were at his home for dinner recently, but he said, because I wrote, I wrote the foreword and said, this has got to be a movie, and it became a movie, made 100 million. And he says, thanks to Mark Victor Hansen, when he talks, people listen. He says, he wrote that, and I now write books I can't read. He's written 50 books in the last 20 years. And he says, and I write movies that I can't watch. It's just really amazing.
Yeah.
So
we touched on this, but kind of going back to how the book is organized. So with the Michaela fable and then the section on the 7 roadblocks. But as you mentioned earlier, the essential parts of the book, or the essence of it, I guess, is talking about the 3 major areas or people, if you will, that you would focus your questions to. And those are questions of ourselves, as you said, and then and then asking others, and then asking God. And I want to make sure that our audience understands that you clarify in the book that God is the label you've chosen, and people all over the world may use other references, but it's whatever you want to call the divine consciousness, higher self, etc. I mean, it's something referring to that aspect that's outside ourselves, that's higher. And I think that anyone that is on life's journey or a spiritual path will recognize, frankly, that asking questions in those 3 ways of those 3 entities, if you will, ourselves, others, and the divine, is really what the spiritual path is about and getting through life. And so I think that's another reason why this topic and this book are so synchronous with IFGT and our work. It just really lines up very nicely. If we have time, we can kind of go back and maybe talk about some of those other sections. The book also, you talk a lot, both of you share some very personal stories especially Crystal, both of you. I think I wanted to make sure I point out that even though you're highly successful now and you have a wonderful life together, and it looks like you enjoy a lot of material comforts, but life didn't start the way for either of you, as far as I could tell.
Nope.
And it's through your hard work and your determination and persistence, as well as I suspect you would credit some type of guidance that has done that. And so it may be easy for some to listen to this and look at you all and say, yeah, but that's, Mark and Crystal. I mean, not all of us can do that. But read your stories and find out that there was no shortage of hard knocks, and put a lot of effort and time. And Crystal, your story about the mirror, ask the mirror questions.
Well, we talk about the holding up the mirror questions, but it was like basically my life pivoting question.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so but that also, again, those are very familiar to those on a spiritual path.
Yeah.
And some that I know say that most of us, if not all of us, actually start that journey because of our suffering, and we're looking for a way out.
It's the suffering sometimes that presents those opportunities, that drives us to that place inside of ourselves and causes us to start asking those questions and paying attention to the answers. And that's the important thing, is like face those questions and answer them honestly. And I think, I talk about that in my own story, and it's amazing how your life can change, just like Michaela's, my life changed 180 degrees. And it never went back, because one of the things is I realized the power of asking the right questions to move forward.
You had to tell me your story though.
Well, I don't know if we have time, but I think he wants him to read it in the book, right, Ken?
We'll come back to it if we can. It is pretty remarkable. I'll just say that at one time, this person who actually, if you ask Mark, she's the Queen of Denmark, and who travels with her. Yeah, I heard that story. So your Royal Highnesses weren't always so royal.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. And a time when food stamps were involved. So I'll leave it at that for now. If we have time, we'll come back to it, because it is very compelling. When I first heard, frankly, that one of the three main things you were recommending was to ask God, I kind of had a reflexive stealing and kind of like, okay, is this going to get, kind of unidimensional and just focused in a certain religious track? And that section starts off with your saying, you've traveled the world, you see this basically universal belief in, or knowledge of, or experience with something higher, something outside ourselves, or at least a higher part of ourselves, in most, if not all, societies, cultures, and in human history. So I'm saying these next few things so that other people don't get a prejudice about when you say ask God, because that's a label and it's a way to try to convey an idea. But there's so much in this section, and it tracks so well with what IFGT does to try. We're not dogmatic, and we don't promote a belief system. We're about that aspect of ourselves that's bigger, and reinforcing and helping people make those transformations to our connection with everything and each other. So another thing that really caught my eyes and ears was your references, which I'd love to hear more about, to the growing intersection of science and spirituality. And in Crystal's bio, there was reference to your research in various sciences, including the quantum sciences, which is fantastic. You talk about the new science that's understanding the aspect of everything really being energy, and that energy being at its most fundamental light. I was just this morning watching some material by Greg Braden, and it really gets.
We love Greg.
Yeah, no, he's outstanding. And also then some things that as I mentioned earlier, some of this stuff can begin to sound kind of woo-woo, and it turns some people off. And what this book does beautifully is brings it back to the everyday. And so there are these things. In fact, I just read an article today about what is all this with manifesting and bringing things into manifestation. And if it's glamorized, it sounds kind of foofy. But if you think of it in the terms that you all put it in, for instance, you talk about, are you going to manifest wealth? If the question you're asking is, am I going to go bankrupt? And that's a pretty straightforward thing. And that begins to move it into more of an everyday concrete that it's pretty simple to understand. If that's where your mindset is, you're probably not going to move yourself toward more affluence if your focus is on worrying about going bankrupt. And there are infinite questions like that. So another just way of this all lining up. So with all of that, do you have just any comments about this section of the book, the relationship of science and spirituality, just all of that I just mentioned?
Well, the height of science, remember, I was in graduate school with Bucky Fuller, and his teacher was Einstein, and both of them said the same thing, because I'm scholarly in both guys, and they're geniuses, of course. But the height of science is metaphysics, which is what God's all about. God is consciousness. God is awareness. The goal is to have a heightened awareness. And now let me bring it back to the practical. When I'd been with Bucky and I tried to be Bucky, and I'm in New York and I built geodesic domes and for Wall Street botanical gardens and aviaries and Wall Street Racket Club, all kinds of stuff. But I went bankrupt because I was building out of PVC. Now, not that I wasn't a good designer and all that, but we were building out of a product that we had an oil embargo. We had 28% interest in 1974. So, I'm 74 years young now, and I'm going to live to be 127. But I was trying to be Bucky, and that's what bankrupted me. And I checked a book out of the world's biggest library, New York Public Library, How to Go Bankrupt by Yourself. Because if you ask the wrong question and aren't any smarter than that, and I wasn't any smarter than that. I'm a 20-something, and so I crashed and burned, and I wanted to kill myself because I thought money and my self-esteem went right. They're not the same, ladies and gentlemen, because there are a lot of people out there that are hanging on by their fingernails now. So I'm not making fun. That's why I write 7 money books like One Minute Millionaire and Richest Kids in America, because I think every kid should learn how to be an entrepreneur. Like, I've had to buy all my own clothes since I was 9. Anyhow, the point is that, when I went bankrupt, fortuitously, I was selling at Dale Carnegie, and 2 guys had sold with me said, let's go to see Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. He helped write us out of the depression, along with Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And that's how you get out of depressions. And I think we're going to go in a recession or a serious depression, given hyperinflation. We can talk to that if you want. But, those kind of books helped in 1898. Wallace Wattles helped, and Horatio Alger, which I won that award, helped. And now I'm one of the guys that's going to help us get out of this, I think. But I went there, and then they said, well, let's go up to Harlem to Reverend Ike's. And I'd never been to a black church before. I grew up in Lutheran and Baptist church, so it was a little astounding to me to be one of 5,000 people with a white face and none other than the 2 guys I'm with. And all of a sudden he's saying, look, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And I thought, whoa, I know the line, but I didn't quite get it at the level he's teaching. And Christ was always rich. He always took shortage, turned into surplus with one thing that's everything, which is consciousness, awareness, infinite intelligence, going into God awareness. And I thought, wow, this guy's manifested 26 Rolls Royces, 20 million people in America, 20 million people in Africa. So I started going there every Sunday at 3 to 6 o'clock at night. If I was in New York City for 7 years, I went, we became best friends. Long story, very short. He dies in 2009. He'd been born in 1935. He was poor. He didn't have 7 cents to buy a meal, and his belly button, he said, stuck to his spine. And he said, where were the bleeding heart liberals when I was starving to death? They weren't willing to feed me or help me out. So he said, I figured out you got to do it on your own and be self-initiative to action. Anyhow, we were best friends. He dies. His wife comes and he says, would I do his biography? Because I know his stuff intimately. I said, that's not what I do. Well, she came back a little later, pushed a ton of money, and we've just finished it, called From Wishes to Riches, The Illuminations of Reverend Ike. And it is a phenomenal book. Won't come out until next year, but it is going to change a lot of lives, black, white, yellow, because he was colorblind, and he said God's colorblind, but God is fundamental awareness. God is, asking all of us the same question. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? Will you invest the energy, the effort, and the wherewithal to go do it? because you were born not endowed, you were born over endowed with 18 billion brain cells that can't come to work until you make the decision. So God in you can make the provision. That's the critical line, God in you. That's where all awareness is. All the awareness we're having on this show is you watching us, but it's inside you. And once you get inside you illuminated, you overcome the 7 roadblocks we talk about in our Ask book, because all of us got some of them, some of us got all of them. And if you got all of them, then you're really almost suicidal. So it's good to look at them in an objective way, try to get over them, because it's human consciousness trying to elevate. I believe you go from self-awareness, self-expression, self-mastery to self-realization. And I'll just do that. We start every day with an hour of prayer and meditation together and ask each other all the serious questions. And there's never been a day after we've done deep meditation, and we do lots of specific things you can ask, and Chris will tell you, but that we don't have mental breakthroughs and we see solutions where everybody else sees a problem, because God didn't give you, God gives you the problem so you wake up to the solution, because we are made in the image and likeness of God, because we're here to create, we're here to contribute, and we're here to be massively charitable. And that's why I get all those awards and have sold more books, because I've tithed in every book. We've tithed in every book since, the first, we got 318 out, and by the end of the year, we'll be at 324, it looks like, based on some other things that are happening. So it's wonderful, but we're here to be monstrously successful and productive. And the only time Christ ever got uptight is when the fig tree didn't fig. It's the only place he cursed. Other than that, he took shortage of fish and bread and fed, they didn't count women and kids. So there's 15,000. He fed them like that and had 12 baskets left over. When the tax man came, he said, "First fish, I have a gold coin, pay for me and the whole team." He was always generous. And that consciousness is that once you get out of ego, which is self-defeating at a lot of levels, and start to ascend in awareness, you become all you can be. And our belief is each of us are here to fulfill our individual potential, or what we're calling destiny.
Yeah. And I want to touch on the destiny aspect. I know that some of the questions that are in the book and that have been discussed in other interviews really focus on, how do you think about destiny? Before we get to that, though, I want to kind of stay with what you were just talking about and what I've been introducing. And we tried to use this program also to remind our audience and get the wisdom of our guests regarding probably the main, or one of the main areas of focus for IFTT, which is advancing what we call the tipping point. And I'm going to read this just so I make sure I don't improvise too much, just to explain what I mean by that. We at the IFTT generally envision the tipping point as a point at which humanity and the world will have transformed into a different, perhaps higher state of consciousness that will include a collective recognition of our connection to all things and consciousness itself. And as I was making my notes reading the book, one of the first notes I made is that asking is a form of connecting and connection. And so it seems right up this alley. It's a way that connectedness takes form, is through asking. We bring things into form. That's, I think, essentially what you were talking about. If you do this, you're going to bring things to yourself, and then you can help others and be charitable and go about life in a very productive, creative, and charitable way. And then the 7th roadblock, interestingly, and not coincidentally, is disconnection. So there's the opposite that gets in the way of connection through asking questions. So you both have spent years now writing, studying, speaking about, not to mention practicing spirituality, as you just shared with us, as a daily practice, which sounds wonderful between the two of you. And so I want to get your thoughts about the tipping point. And first of all, would you agree, and you've seen much more of the world than I have, so would you agree that there is a momentum and a movement toward this tipping point for humanity as I described it?
I definitely agree with it. And I know Mark does. We talk about this all the time. We see a huge rise in consciousness, conscious awareness. And what it is people are starting to understand that the divinity doesn't necessarily exist in any particular church building, but that the divinity, it exists in the temple called you.
Right.
This is the real temple right here. And so source, God, lives inside of all of us. And I think it's that disconnection, when we're completely disconnected from who we really are, that we get sick and feel sad, and we disconnect from one another. Because if I'm the temple of God, then so are you. And so is the guy cleaning up the floor. And so is the person providing, the food for us. And so every single one of us plays an important role in this web. We all have different roles, just like, it's just like if we're one body of humanity, we need the eyes to do their job, and we need the brain to do its job, and we need the lips to do their job. We're not all going to be, the lips can't be a brain, and right, the hands can't be whatever, legs, so it's important to be happy and be good with who you are. We're all different, but we're all part of that body, that one body. And, like Mark was saying, the way Rev I taught was the God in you, and it makes all the difference in the world. It says, scripture says we're created in the creator's image. Well, we see that through science. I mean, when you just look at, for example, when you ask a question, right, a different part of your brain lights up. You can't ask a question without changing your brain. And it's science, right? So the frontal cortex of your brain will light up, and that is the critical thinking part of your brain. So how is it that you could be created so beautifully, so divinely, so perfectly, that you ask a question? Only a human being can ask a question. So, right? And we receive the answers. So we truly are created in this creator's image. It doesn't matter what we call God, creator, universal, holy father, whatever, mother. It just is. And the important thing is that we recognize it, and we recognize it that it's inside of us. And really, we were talking about, you mentioned quantum physics. I mean, quantum physics is just proof of the divine, proof that we are creating divinely in every moment. Because essentially, what quantum physics is, in a nutshell, is whatever I'm observing is what I'm going to see. Think about that. So if you think about your daily life, what are you expecting to see every day in your daily life? Usually it's what we're replaying from the day before, all the same problems, issues, difficulties. We expect them to rear up the next day. And until we intervene with new questions, nothing changes. So and it starts with asking those questions of yourself. Where am I now in my life? Because you can't know where to go unless you know where you are right now. What's the real analysis? Am I happy? Is it working? Is there an emptiness, or is there something more that I know is out there? And where would I want to be? In the greatest nth degree of my greatest imagination, which only human beings have an imagination. We literally, every beautiful thing in the universe has been created, in the world, I should say, by some human being's imagination. Every invention, every medicine, every amazing thing came from someone's imagination, just like yours. You have that same imagination. So there's no limitation to what you can create. So we are just so much more divine than we realize. And if we, follow this intervention process of asking, there's no mechanism that has the ability to reveal what is hidden from you like asking. It's really like the magic key that opens all doors.
I think you've just helped to reinforce this idea that it sounds so simple, and how can you write a whole book on ask, and why are you getting all these interviews and selling so many copies, and why did IFTT want to talk to you so badly? I think you've helped answer some of those questions.
Can I add just one thing to what you said, all of which is correct? Is that when our study of Reverend Ike, which has been very intensive for about 1.5 years, right? Because the guy was a genius. He preached for 60 years, never repeated the same thing, had totally original stuff. You can watch him on YouTube today. I'm not trying to sell Reverend Ike. He was so instrumental in my learning to think prosperous rather than poverty, because no one should be poor. God didn't want us to be poor. God made us to be rich, made a rich universe to participate. But what the most important chapter, as far as I'm concerned, and she can have her own opinion, is the second chapter in the book on supernatural healing. Because remember I said, once you go it up to self-realization, self-actualization, cosmic consciousness, it doesn't matter what we call it. It matters that you've done the self-work. Christ said, the work I've done, you can do in greater work. This guy really worked on himself. And that's why he'd have people come in with tuberculosis, have 4 people carrying him in a bed, and they'd heal like that. People with protruding hemorrhoids healed like that, because he said, I never saw the sickness in him. I saw the divinity in him. And that's really what consciousness is about, is finding what is that divine self, which unfortunately over half of humanity doesn't even think they get a divine self. And if you're in a socialistic or communist country, which means atheism, then, and I don't care whether you're Christian or Buddhist or Zen, Astro, or what, I'm not here saying we have to be Christian, but it doesn't matter as much, is that because there's only one God, there's only one universe, universe, one verse. And what happens is when you're in tune with the infinite, you start to go, holy cow, he made this whole place. He flung the stars into the sky. He made amazing, and it works perfectly. There's nowhere on our earth that you don't wake up and the sun rises in the east, which is part of quantum physics, because you start to know the science. Science sets in order the facts of experience so you can use it to your benefit. So you don't get eaten by the animal, that you eat the animals, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Assuming you're not if you're a vegetarian and you eat the carrot, okay.
Yes. So I think that my next question is probably redundant. I'll ask it, but do you think that this tipping point is something that is destined, or is it maybe it's an but it's going to take our deliberate effort and our will to bring it about, or is it just going to happen by itself?
I will have a shot at it different. I don't think it's redundant at all. I think you have a great mind like Elon Musk, who is driven to really make humanity work. And he's so honest that he said, here's the 5 things I was going to do at Stanford. And then he's done them, whether it's Tesla or SpaceX. But now this Neuralink, and he says, hey, look, Neuralink, Tesla is actually AI, a computer on wheels that drives the car, and it's going to be self-driving. But he says AI is just, I'm doing my words, not his. It's like fire. It'll warm your house, but it'll burn it down if you don't know how to use it right. And what he's really saying, go deep in that, the spiritual thing, is that what your consciousness has got to be is understanding moral principles, moral awareness. Because if you have no morality, then right now the war going on, it's murdering children and kids and raping and robbing, all of which happens in every war, right? Through history. I mean, we've lost 1,000 civilizations based on one of the great historians that's a close friend of ours. So I'll believe that number is his, Rodder's, not Mark's. But the point is, AI is a great asset to our ascent. Like, we're amazed that AI, when we're driving the car and we've got on maps, it tells you next turn right at this building. And, you go, wow, that is like way cool, because it gets closer and closer and you can't get lost if you've got AI. But the point is, it can also zone in and wipe out everybody with drones and bullets and all that, and face recognition. So, and that's all Elon Musk is saying, hey, wait a second, somebody's got to have a moral awareness, and the computer doesn't have it, right? The computer can do what it executes what you ask it to execute, but it can't think. And that's what God gave us. The greatest thing we've got is an imagination used positively. But because we're in a universe that is a dual universe, you got positive and you got negative. A lot of people are negative and they don't even know they're negative. They've never looked at asking themselves, why am I doing this? Why am I driven to power? Why am I trying to take over, parts of Europe right now? This is like dumbass squared as far as I'm concerned.
Right. And I'd like to say, just to add to that, this tipping point, I do think people are moving toward a higher understanding of just what we talked about the divinity in all of us. And when I understand that, I realize I'm no more important than you. And when the whole world starts to understand the importance of every individual, that's when it really starts to change. There aren't any expendable people in this world. We just need to have better solutions. And it's been said that there's been free energy out there for a long time. It's just the powers that be. There's this greed, power, control structure that seems to be at the very corporate level, that, it's never enough. It literally becomes an insatiable greed for just more and more and more. But I think that's changing. I think we're getting more conscious, entrepreneurs, capitalists like Elon Musk, who will live in a 500 square foot house and work on the floor with his people all day long, because he doesn't think of himself as an elite that, needs to be floating around on a yacht. I just think it's getting, those things are happening. They're happening in a really good way. And we'll get there. I mean, we're always going to have some bumps because it's a collective consciousness, right? But the more we pull together and put our best effort into life, that builds, that energy of our best effort, every single one of us, because we're the body and we're the body of humanity. So we just need to show up every day and, not be cynical, not be jaded, but really give it our best. How am I contributing, doing my part?
And
right?
when I was in India studying as a student ambassador to India, I was at Gandhi's houses, and the biggest line he had that I thought was best was, "There's enough for everybody's need, but never enough for anyone's greed." And that's really what Crystal is saying. And that's
Right.
what consciousness is about. If you come out of a scarcity consciousness, I'm going to grab. I'm going to get all I can for me because I'm only going to take care of me. That's why I'm saying there's got to be a moral and an ethical balance that you start to understand. Look, you can't breathe all the air. You can suck in all the air you want. You hold it, you're going to die. It's that simple. You got to breathe in and breathe out. You got to take it in
Give
and take
take.
it out. You got to learn, earn, and then what we teach, the triangle, is return.
I want to respect your time. We've got a couple of questions from the audience, so hopefully we can get to both of them. And you may have just answered this one, but I want to give the questioner their due. Chris Chavez typed the question, capitalism is the answer. And I think you were addressing that may have gone to some of the things you were talking about earlier, but I want to give you the chance to answer his question.
In a sense, yeah, honest capitalism is the answer. And the guy who's written the book on that is our neighbor, Kiyosaki, the guy who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There's no competition between us and our friend Robert. And he's just written a capitalist manifesto, but it's got to be honest, ethical, moral capitalism that's conscious. And we're having unconscious capitalism because the people they think they're not enough. So they're in a scarcity model like I was. And so I respect that they've never looked at themselves and said, wait a second, am I going to live in a prosperity model where there's more than enough for everybody? Because we fundamentally have enough for the first time in history, thanks to technology. But if you exploit the technology, like some of the Silicon Valley brats are doing, they're schmapling everybody, and it's not a good idea.
Yeah. We have another question. This is actually from one of our members and board members, and also a fellow author. So I don't know if Diane or Alan has the question. I'm guessing probably Diane, but go ahead, please.
How did you guess? Well, Crystal and Mark, just really enjoy and resonate with everything you're saying. And I have two things. One is I have a question specifically regarding what, Mark, you said a while back, which I'll say in a minute, but I'm having a magical destiny moment with you, Mark. Crystal, listen to this, that many years ago when you were doing motivational speaking and mostly in insurance organizations, and I was working for a Fortune 50 company in Miami in a management, and I engaged you to come and speak to my staff, and we met, and I had a name then, and you were doing this series.
Yeah, Build a Better You starting now, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I got this a few years ago on research. So my little chapter is in there about liberating your creativity. I have to tell you that real quick because it's amazing, the destinal moment right now. And I'll just say for everybody that I remember one thing you said to me is that you came into my office and you said, you can do what I'm doing. And that has stuck in my mind, Mark, Victor Hansen, all these years. So anyway, Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. Yeah, listen, I'm glad.
I love
And
that.
I'm glad you've done all that you've done. I don't even know what you've done.
You said that now you see your destiny when you were talking about all those early authors and inspirational thinkers and prosperity people, and that you see yourself now as being that for going forward as we're going through this complete restructuring of, it seems like, well, of every system, but particularly in the financial systems. What do you see now, and how do you both see your roles in this?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're in, right, you're in high school, you all read the same book, best times, worst times, and it depends on your attitude and your aptitude and all that stuff, right? And so I'm going to have a positive attitude. The governmental thing, it appears to me, want to be omniscient and create a Fed coin. The solution to that, it seems to me, is decentralization of finance in a multiplicity of ways. Everything from making sure we have Cash Friday. Everybody ought to go to the bank and pull out as much cash as they can and spend only cash on Friday on stuff you can't write off as a tax thing. That's number one. You ought to have gold, silver, and real estate, which we believe in. I think you ought to, we are coming out with some NFTs, quite honestly, that we're going to sell a lot of books because of NFTs, and NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which are sort of Bitcoin based at one level, but then the whole, you're asking a very big topic that we've been to 3 giant think tanks talking everywhere in the country. And we got one coming up here in June 9th called Limitless. And we're on with 50 or what we think the best thinkers are in economy in the planet. Everybody from George Gaiman to Lynette Zhang to Ken McElroy to, on and on. And we're in a time that everyone's got to make sure they are consciously aware of that money is psychological. It's also spirit. Money is, first of all, material stuff like a gold coin. Then it's psychological. What do we believe about money? Then there's a spiritual element where if you get high enough in consciousness, you can do what's called instant manifestation, which is right now the people that are out there listening, scratching their head going, I think Hanson's gone cuckoo on us. But the fact of the matter is we know how to do all that stuff and have learned it because we've been good, zealous students. And so it's exciting. So it's an exciting time if you're awake. It's a dangerous time if you're not awake, because the people that are trying to take all the money, and I can certainly name those people, are trying to crush the middle class, which is what has made America great. And I love the middle class. My parents were lower middle class, of course. And I'm not besmirching them. They just didn't know what I know. I know how to scale. I scale every company I own, and we're scaling 3 companies right now. So it breaks my heart that these people have not been taught, because we've got an educational system that trains you to be a drone and an industrial wonk, grow up and get a job. That means if you've read any of my money books, I re-acronymed it just over broke. Just over broke is dumbass squared as far as I'm concerned. I'm in judgment only because there's fundamental abundance for everybody. Everybody's got a great talent. The best songs haven't been sung, the best inventions haven't been made, the best books haven't been written. We can go on and on in the litany, but you're supposed to answer now.
Oh,
and I hope that wasn't too blasphemous.
Well, I thought that was quite expansive, and I was into all the things you were saying about NFTs and everything else about, looking at the wide range of the financial systems and structures that we have going, but especially about teaching young people that this is our destiny, is to have wealth and to be able to enjoy the abundance that is God-given. So thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. And then I think one of the things we need to be really careful of in this world is, the more centralized power gets, the more the regular person is left out of that equation. So a lot of people think it sounds great, just concentrate the power all in Washington, but we weren't set up that way. The reason we have 50 states is each of the states actually sends their elected representatives to represent them and their values. And so that's the system that we really need to be careful to hold on to when we start seeing an overreach of this centralized power, where suddenly just with a swoop of a pen, they can, wipe away like cash. The problem with what's happening right now is they're printing so many dollars that don't have any backing or any basis, because we went off the gold standard way back with Nixon, 71 with Nixon. So now we're just printing it on the American promise. but right now we have so many dollars in print that it was 40% of the money in circulation was printed in the last 18 months. That's a lot. That's almost half. That's a problem because it dilutes when you add that much money, those dollars that you had already and everything you own, it's now worth half of that. And so we really have to be careful of all these centralized ideas. Let's just, do a Fed coin and turn in all your cash. And, the people need to stay involved. We all are part of the body. And people think, oh, I hear these stories about, oh, well, isn't capitalism bad? Capitalism has exploited people. Capitalism isn't a perfect system, but it's the better system. Because when you get away from capitalism and you go to this socialist or communist model, you're moving in to where you now just have a handful of people telling the entire world what to do. And you don't have a vote anymore. You don't have a say. It's the promises that everything's going to be provided for you. It's all hunky-dory, but the provisions will be gone because in every model that it's been proven out, it's never, the promise is never there at the end of the day because the power tends to just gather all the assets and all the spoils, and then everybody gets the crumbs. The best system is the system that echoes our divine creation. That is, we have autonomy over these bodies. We are all individual creators. We need to come together, and every voice counts. Every person matters. And we need to keep that individual decision in our government, in our systems. We can't be lazy and say, oh, they'll take care of me. I'll just let them do it all, because it doesn't end well. That's when 70 million people starved to death in Russia under that plan.
So brilliantly said, Crystal. Thank you.
No, she's way wiser than me, but let me just, the fundamental thing that you're asking about, do we want to have freedom, which is never free, or do we want to have authoritarianism? And right now, I've been to China 80 times. When it was capitalistically communistic, they were having us do it. We've been to Vietnam the last 2 years until COVID hit, and they've hired us again and we got to go back, but because we're trying to keep capitalism honest and ethical and moral and uplifted. But the point is, in China right now, they've shut down now for the last 58 days in a row, Shanghai, which is 27 million people starving to death, beating on their windows, nobody feeding them.
Right.
Now, I don't exactly understand this power and control thing of Xi, because I don't like this man. He is not a good man. He's a Maoist communist, which Mao kills 78 million people, and that's not an exaggeration, where Hitler kills 6 million and Stalin killed 58 million. That's poor consciousness. That means that you think you're better than somebody. There's nobody better than anyone else, or somebody that has studied more, learned more. But we've been to Mao's house together. We've been to China a lot. And it just, what they're doing now, they're wrecking the people, and they've made 10 million slaves making Nike shoes, which Phil Knight ought to be ashamed of himself for letting that happen. To take people and enslave them, and then they're stealing their body parts and selling them. If they don't work hard enough, they just steal their body parts. This is not humanity. This is not human rights. You unfortunately, because you and I are sort of friends for 40 years, or whenever you were kind enough to hire me, you may be saying you're going off too far, Mark, and that's okay. None of you hearing me have to listen, but I'm asking you to open up your minds and think new thoughts, because the mind only works like a parachute when it's open.
Do you guys have time for any more questions, or?
We'll take one more. Yep, we'll take one more if that's okay.
Okay, because I may email you. I would love your thoughts on your suggestions for what IFGT can do to advance the tipping point, but we've got, if you can answer that briefly, and then I've got one other audience member that I'd like to give a chance to ask if you've got a couple more minutes. Okay. So what are your thoughts on how we're obviously a relatively small and all volunteer organization. What can we do? What is the invention in us that you see that we could do to advance the tipping point?
Wow, that's a good question. I want to think about that. I mean, I love what you're doing. I think having these conversations is really important, exposing as many people as possible to the truth of who they are by having guests on that have, important insights to share. insights that empower others in different ways. I mean, I think you're really doing a great job of it, honestly, Ken.
Great.
Yeah, when I went to college, I wanted to change a tipping point. I wrote a book called Conferencing and Crashing Your Way to an Education. I thought, wow, this is going to be good. And Bucky thought it was good, but somehow I've lost it during the thing. But the point is, when I went to conferences and heard the best minds say stuff, and it was confrontive to my mind a lot. But then when you thought about it, you said, wow, that guy's right, even though I didn't like what he said at the time. And some other people out there are going to go, boy, you're too vehement about this, Mark, which is okay. Right? I just want to I want to be the gadfly that stabs you alive, stabs your spirit alive to wake you up to your full awareness and potential and consciousness, because that's your goal. As you keep doing that, exactly what Crystal said, that's why I'm saying is you have all these people, some of whom have different points of view. So we keep free speech free. Right. Now, I like to get paid for my speeches and get paid a lot, 35,000 in America and 75,000 international, and people are willing to pay it and keep hiring us. So, and her too. So it's exciting. But the point is, we need to have a voice box like yours, because everybody can't travel to different places in the world, but everybody in the world can get to you if you keep bringing the best thinking available, which is what you're doing. And thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. If you have time for one more, Henry, I think you've had your hand up for a while, so go ahead and unmute and we'll get Henry Shelton to ask a last question.
Well, thank you, Ken. It's not so much of a question as it is of comment, and congratulations. I want to thank Mark and Victor for this wonderful book. Some of you on the call know my work is around life purpose. And so when you talk about the bridge from your dreams to your destiny, and you're putting this out to the world, I know deep in my heart it's going to affect and positively a lot of people. So yeah, I just wanted to commend you. And then I really knew you were on track when you said you were going to be synchronicity. You're going to be working on a biography of one of my grandmothers, my late grandmother's late hero, Dr. Reverend Ike.
Yeah,
so,
Dr. Reverend Ike, yep.
Yeah, so I know you're on point with that. And another last point is, when I heard you say this, I say, okay, this guy's really, when decentralization is the way to go. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago on Spiritual Happy Hour, the week before we presented your book. But you said it, Mark, honest, ethical, moral, and let me add, loving and a trusting economic system. We have to be about putting that in place, and we have all the tools, and Crystal's been saying it over and over and over again. Each individual in the world becomes an integral part of this new economy that we can build. And so collectively we can do it. So I want to thank you all for coming on and sharing and to keep doing it. So thank you again. Thank you, both of you.
We appreciate it. Appreciate being here.
We all can't thank you enough. And I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity, if there's anything we didn't cover. I know you've got all sorts of irons in the fire, great new project, the Mark Victor Hansen Library, I believe.
We did that, because a lot of people are afraid to write a book, and I did a book called You Have a Book, and you know, but people come up to me and say, well, I can't write, and 98% of people aren't really good at it. So what we've done is we've started markvictorhansenlibrary.com. It is a ghostwriting publishing company where you tell us your ideas, your principles, your thoughts, and we can do it as a nonfiction or a fiction. But fiction books sell 10,000 to 1. Last year, $4 billion was made in nonfiction books, but $47 billion was made in fiction books. So we've helped a lot of people write fiction books. Now we charge for it. We're sort of a hybrid press that charges $27,900, and we are quite honestly booming. We're finished 59 books pretty much, and like Mitzi Perdue at Purdue Chicken that does 22 million chickens a week. The guy and her book's called Rich Widows, and people look at it. We start with the title and the cover, and she's an amazing woman. And then the guy that did DocuSign that did 8.5 billion. Crystal came up with the title Signature Trust. So we're doing trust books because America, we've lost trust in the government. We've lost trust in the economy. We've lost trust in the federal. We've lost so much trust. And this guy wants to get it back, Keith Crotch. And he's an amazing, we were with him at Horatio Alger. We took him as our guest. So we're in an amazing time, and we're doing impactful books. So if that fits, just go to markvictorhansenlibrary.com and we're a booming publisher, but we get to charge you and then help you make a book successful if that's what you want.
Great. And then anything else that you wanted to share with us? Any other things going on that you want to let our audience know about?
Yeah, I would just, after you grab your copy of Ask, you guys please join us for the free webinar. If you go to askthebookclub.com, we'll send you an invitation. Love to have everybody there and spread the word. It's really helping a lot of people right now get to a new place, which is what we need.
Okay, that's askthebookclub.com. We'll include that in the show notes. Well, this has been stellar, better than I ever imagined. It's been just a delight, and
We did.
really enjoyed it, and can't thank you enough. Wish you a good and safe evening, and thank everyone who joined us tonight and who will watch us on YouTube. Please come back and watch us next month. We've got some more further interesting guests and some neat stuff coming up, so encourage that. Thank you all. Have a good time. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone.